Hey friends, I'm Ben, and I hope you're having fun learning about Psalm 9. I want to teach you a new word. The word is chiasm. Repeat after me. Chiasm. Yeah, it looks like chiasm, but it's pronounced chiasm, like the name of our friend Kai Schmidt, who's the leader with the Brader Way guys. But it's spelled like this because it's not named after Kai Schmidt. It's named after the Greek letter chi, which is shaped like this. And a chiasm is a form of poetry shaped like that, like our letter X or the Greek letter chi, where the top thing resembles the bottom thing. The second to last thing resembles the second thing, etc. And the most important thing is where it comes together in the middle. Let me show you a couple examples of a chiasm in English. The first one is simple. Your dog bit my nose, so I bit your dog. If we line it up vertically, this sentence is shaped like the letter X. The top and bottom are both your dog. Next in from there is bit, and then I or my, and the pivot is the nose. So sometimes you can label the lines to catch that mirror structure. A matches A prime, etc. And in this case, we've got D in the middle. Now notice, in a chiasm, sometimes the corresponding lines are identical, and sometimes they're similar, like I and my. Now here's another one. Let's see this next poem piece by piece. This is a big deal. Tickets sell out. The stadium fills up. The crowd goes wild. Is Taylor Swift dating Travis Kelce? Oh, the internet goes wild. Swift and Kelce leave the stadium together. Kelce jerseys sell out. And then we move on to the next big deal. We've got another chiasm. Line A and A prime both talk about a big deal. B and B prime, something sells out. C and C prime refer to the stadium. D and D prime, a collective goes wild. And then the pivot point, the critical line that tells you what the poem is all about. You didn't really know in this case when you were reading the first 4 lines. It's a poem about a possible dating relationship between a pop star and a football player. Now, the center of a chiasm holds the poem together, and yet the meaning of the poem isn't only in the center, it's also in the contrast between the halves, right? So here, the first half is generic, and the second half is specific. There's emotional variance. Line D ends in a period. D prime ends in an exclamation point. And C prime ends with the emoji. And line C, people are going into the stadium. C prime, they're moving out of the stadium. And of course, line A makes it sound like we're talking about a real big deal. But A prime reveals that the poet is actually making a comment about these pop culture moments. So you'll find chiasms throughout the Old Testament. There are places in the Bible where the chiasm is obvious and easy to see even in an English translation. Psalm 9 isn't the most obvious chiasm in the Psalms, but as we pay close attention, it pops out for us. And it's pretty awesome. So let's look at verses 1 through 14, starting at the outside and then working our way in. Here in verses 1 and 2 and 14, you can see that they're both about praising God and being joyful. But verses 1 and 2, the poet is saying something that they will do. And verse 14 is asking God to save them so that they can praise him and so they can rejoice. Now let's shrink these verses and add the next layer inward And these are verses about enemies, my enemies, and death. But verse 3 says, my enemies retreated, and they're the ones who die. Verse 13 is about how my enemies have tormented me, and so I'm asking God to save me from death. Next layer in is all about names. Verse 5 is about their names and how they're forgotten. But verse 10 is about God's name and how it is worthy of trust. Now we're looking at dwelling places in the next layer in. The cities of the enemy will come to ruins. But another dwelling place is a shelter. It's not a place, it's the Lord himself is a shelter, is a refuge. And finally, we come to the center, to the pivot point. Verses 7 and 8. God reigns. He rules. He is the judge, fair and just. The center of the poem focuses on God's character and actions. These verses serve as a pivot point between how the nations experience God's character in the first half of the poem versus how the oppressed experience his character in the second half. It's this beautiful chiasm with a powerful idea at its heart. Now back to you to continue digging into this psalm together in your small groups.